Arriaga, a quick, I'll try to keep it relatively short being less than 17 minutes, video on the costs or potential costs of an NVA non-value added meeting. So question number one you have to ask yourself is, how many meetings do you hold? How many meetings do you attend that actually add value? And let's define value as something that the customer would be willing to pay for. So if you're the customer, would you be willing to pay for this meeting? One of the things that I'll talk about is being a good steward for your business. And so being a good steward is to be resourceful with the company's resources, financial, human resources, etc. So start thinking in terms as a business owner. Where I work, we have centers of excellence. We call them COEs. And I ask people or remind people, you need to think like a CEO, not as a COE leader. So always put on the hat of an entrepreneur. Put on the hat of the CEO of the organization, the company that you work for, and ask yourself, is the information that I'm communicating in this meeting, is this the only way that that communication can be sent out? Is this the only way that that communication can be made? You can't send it out via email. You're saying that you can't have a phone call. You're saying that you can't send it out in Teams if your company uses Teams as a vehicle, as an option. So start thinking about that. So I'll just kind of quickly touch on some of the notes that I have here. So to the left, I say calculate how much the meeting costs. Calculate how much each minute over and each 10 minutes over will cost the company. So if you have a meeting that's scheduled for an hour, which is bad enough, it's costing the company a lot of money, and then you decide to run it over by a minute or run it over by 10 minutes, what's that cost? So let's imagine you have 10 people that were invited. And most meetings that I attend, that will be a very small meeting. There are oodles and large numbers of people that are invited. And I would say, in my opinion, over 90% of the people that are invited to those meetings do not need to be there. In fact, in my opinion, over 99% of the meetings that are being held don't need to be held at all. The information from that meeting can be communicated in different ways. One way would be, for example, recording a video. If you're going to have the meeting, why don't you consider recording the video as I am and sending it out? Because oftentimes what happens is, imagine, for example, that you get the newspaper every day. Every day it's news. Every day it's relatively current. Every day there might be parts in there that are significant and other parts that are not so significant. So imagine that you gather 10 people, 20 people, 30 people, 100 people, just so you can read the newspaper out to them. And you would think, it's like, well, that makes no sense. They can read the newspaper themselves. Or if necessary, I can summarize the newspaper and send it out in an email. So I want you to kind of just look at things a little bit differently. Isn't that essentially what you're doing? Because for me, I'm the type of person where I don't need to know how the clock works. I just need to know what time it is. And I would imagine most other people attending your meetings are thinking the same way. They don't care how the clock works. Just tell them what time it is so they can move on and have more productivity throughout their day, so they can do work that's meaningful. They can add value in other areas. And you're adding value to the organization where you're operating with the mindset of a CEO. So let's say, for example, you have 10 people that you invited to this meeting. And let's say on average, each one makes $100,000. So you're going to adjust that money. This is not intended to be a precise calculation. The calculation is precise, but the salary range doesn't matter. You figure out what is an appropriate example for you. But let's imagine that you have these 10 people that make $100,000 a year and that they get 2 weeks vacation. Now, I know people get more vacation than that, but let's just, for the purposes of keeping the math relatively simple, we're going to say they get 2 weeks vacation a year. So that means out of 52 weeks a year, they're working 50. Now, 50 weeks times 40 hours a week is 2,000 hours. Now, if they make $100,000 a year, you're going to take 100,000, you're going to divide it by 2,000, and that comes out to $50 an hour per person. So when you ask each person to attend your meeting, that's $50 an hour times 10 people that you invited. That's a $500 meeting. So again, you're asking yourself, is this really worth $500 to the organization? I can assure you that if the money was coming out of your department's budget, if the money were coming out of your pocket, your pocketbook, you would not have this meeting. You'd figure out a more effective way, a more efficient way of communicating this information. So now each person makes $50 an hour. And so you divide the $50 an hour by 60 minutes. That's $8.33 per person. So if you ask me to stay an extra 10 minutes, the meeting is running in an extra 10 minutes, $8.33 times 10, or I'm sorry, 83 cents a minute. And 83 cents a minute times 10 is $8.33. So that's costing me, it'd be better if it costs you $8.33 so you can understand the value. Because again, you don't want to be wasteful with the money. You don't want to be wasteful with the resources. You want to be a good steward with the human, with the finances, with all the resources that are being made available to you. You want to be a good steward in terms of how you handle those areas. So if it's $8.33 for one person to be held 10 minutes, now you're asking these 10 people in the room to stay the 10 minutes. That comes out to $80.33. So it's an additional, on top of the $500, you're costing another $80.33 for the 10 people to stay another 10 minutes. If you look at it differently, you say, well, what if I ended the meeting 10 minutes early? Well, then you would save the organization at least $80. So it's one way, again, of looking at the value of your meetings. And so again, let me slide my camera over so we can look at what's on the right. So the point, what's the takeaway? Number one, by no means am I saying that you should not have any meetings, because you should know, I imagine that you do know, that meetings can be essential. Meetings are required. There's value in having meetings. And that's why I said non-value-added meetings. There's certain meetings that are critical, you have to have them. But you have to ask yourself, is this meeting that I scheduled, is it valuable or non-valuable? Is this the only way that I can communicate the information? And are all the people that were invited to this meeting, are they truly essential? Now let me help you understand, if you're the recipient, you were invited to the meeting, one way of determining whether you are or are not essential. One simple way of doing it is, if you already had a meeting and the person who scheduled their meeting tosses their meeting on top of your meeting, and they don't have the courtesy to reach out and say, hey, Rich, I noticed you had a meeting scheduled on this day and this time, and that's the only time that was available for most people. Can you be there? You're essential to this meeting. If they do that, if they have the courtesy of doing that, then you know you're essential. But if they don't do that, you are now non-essential. You don't have to attend the meeting. My opinion, based on my experience. Another way for you to manage, to empower yourself, is that sometimes when you're invited to these meetings, maybe consider either A, not showing up at all, and then contact the person and say, hey, what did I miss? Now, you shouldn't have to do that if they're following good meeting etiquette, which is they're keeping minutes and or they're writing a summary and sending a summary out. But that's one way of doing it, again, is just contact the person afterwards. Or another way is you can join the meeting about 10 minutes before the end of the meeting. Because I have, in my experience, I've discovered that the last 10 minutes is really when the main discussion takes place. That's either when a summary is occurring or the meat of the meeting is being discussed. And if you join and they try to go back and say, hey, let me go back because Rich just joined, tell them, no, that's okay. Just continue forward. If there's any questions that I have, I'll reach out to you. So you're being courteous, you're being sensitive to the rest of the people that are in the meeting. So what I wrote down in terms of suggestions is, do we know the purpose of the meeting in advance? So for example, if the purpose of the meeting is to get an approval for an item, an approval for an activity, then that should have been sent out at the beginning before the meeting, should have been sent out with the meeting saying the purpose of this meeting is to get an approval for X, Y, and Z. Because whenever, in the few times that I've seen that type of information conveyed in the meeting, I'll just say, it's approved, cancel the meeting. Or it's like, cancel the meeting, let me just discuss with you so we can determine if this meeting is necessary. So be very clear in terms of what is the intention of the meeting. Number 2, it says, consider handling us via single email phone call. So again, do I really need to have this meeting? And most of the time the answer truly is no. I know that there are people out there that think that the value that they add to the organization is by having meetings, by bringing people together. That's not an accurate way of thinking about meetings. That's not being a good business steward. So again, you can still communicate, you just don't have to take the time and resources that you are by having a meeting. A lot of these meetings are non-essential. Number 3, if you're looking for an approval, like I said, send that at the beginning before the meeting takes place. Number 4, use the minimum number of slides. You don't need 50 slides. You don't need 25 slides. Whenever I have like one of my team members, they're doing presentation for a different organization, different group, I always ask them, assume you have 5 minutes. Assume you are allowed a maximum of 3 slides. And the point of that is to get to the point of your material. Again, I don't need to know how the clock works. I just need to know what time is it. Tell me what you're trying to tell me. I'm smart enough to figure out the rest. And if I'm not, I'll ask you a question. I'll ask you a question outside of the meeting. So this way I'm not taking up everyone else's time. Number 5, take things offline if discussion will take more than the allotted time for the topic. So there should be not only the person who's facilitating the meeting, there should be a timekeeper in the meeting. And it's the role of the timekeepers to make sure that we're on time, make sure that we don't go astray, that we don't get derailed by unnecessary questions or focus into other areas. Sometimes what people do is they don't even prepare for the meeting. They decide that at the meeting, this is where I'm going to ask all these questions that they should have prepared themselves in advance. And the timekeeper would say, hey, let's take that offline. We can discuss that later. Put it in what they call parking lot. We're going to put that on the parking lot. Basically, the point of that is just to keep the meeting going, keep the flow, and keeping you on time and on task and on purpose. Number 6, have a specific agenda with actions and action owners, and be conscious of the time. Prepare in advance. You shouldn't have to say prepare in advance, but guess what? You have to say prepare in advance. Number 8, do the same cost per minute analysis with your meetings and replace the CEO's name with yours. So think of the CEO, replace their name and make yourself the CEO. If you're a responsible CEO, if you are a good CEO, you know you would be agreeing with what I'm saying in principle. You know, you would say, hey, we have to take these meetings more, the way we conduct our meetings much more seriously, and we're going to be very active and aggressive about reducing the amount of meetings. We want people to be free to do the things that they're truly getting paid for. What I like to say is people have to be empowered to say no. What does that mean? Let me explain it. That means that they should be empowered to say no to the things that matter least so that they can say yes to the things that matter the most. They're eliminating the trivial many so they can focus on the vital few. That's one of the goals, one of the missions. Number 9, share this communication with your team. So you see I have a little diagram in the middle here. Basically, it's the same thing. You've got 10 people, $500 an hour. You divide it by 60 minutes. That's $8 or 83 cents a minute per person, or $8.33 for the 10 people if you hold them for 1 extra minute. If you hold them for 10 extra minutes, that's $80. Let's just round up, call it $100. Let's see, scroll down, number 10 attendees, you're not essential. So I explained that again. If somebody tosses their meeting on top of yours, guess what? You're not essential. Go ahead and cancel the meeting. Don't attend. And number 11, encourage summary notes or, if necessary, meeting minutes to be provided for each. So the person who's held the meeting, they should be having minutes if it's required. If it's not required, don't waste your time, the company's time, on taking minutes that are not necessary. But you should have summary of the meeting. So again, there's sometimes minutes are necessary, have them. Sometimes meetings are necessary, have them. I'm talking about when they're not. When it's an option, be much a better steward with the company's resources. And so I think this is a matter of just reminding people over and over again. It's not about beating people up. It's not about making them feel bad. It's a habit that they have. They don't know better. You're raising the level of awareness, and find out a way of kind of rewarding the behavior. It doesn't have to be a financial reward. So for example, you might want to discourage, this is not reward, this you discourage the behavior, but just saying, hey, from now on, for my team, what I want is whenever you schedule a meeting, even if it's a one-on-one, whenever you schedule a meeting, let's just assume that the salary between us is $100 an hour. I want you to calculate the cost of that meeting. And then the reward is, I want you at the end of the month also figure out how much money you saved. So let's say, for example, you decided not to have 5 meetings with the 10 people. And we did the math based on $500 an hour. So if you have 5 meetings, that would have been $500 per meeting. 5 times 5 is $2,500. So it's like, hey, I saved $2,500. Now you may ask, well, Rich, well, who's going to measure this? How are you going to know that I'm telling the truth? We're not looking to actually pay you the money for saving. We're looking for an opportunity to say, hey, great job, nice job. I've noticed the change. So the goal is to give me reason to say thank you. Give me reason, give your manager reason to say, I noticed that you've been much more deliberate, much more conscious. You're probably going to get rewarded at the end of the year, but the goal, again, is like, I'm going to take your word for it. I don't have no reason to think that you're going to be lying and fudging the numbers. So I believe that if you're working with this, both in the letter and the spirit of its intent, you're going to be an honest person. You're going to tell me this is how much money I've saved by changing my behavior. You're going to feel better. I'm going to feel better. The organization is going to fare better just because of what you're doing, and it's going to spread. Other people are going to see. You're going to be preaching, teaching, encouraging other people to do the same thing. So this is just, in my opinion, a very good way of rewarding, a good way of raising awareness, and a good way of saving your organization a lot of money. Again, you're freeing people up so they can do value-added, meaningful work, and they can focus on the vital few. You're empowering people by doing something like this. So this is Rich Arriaga. Have a great day. Reach out to me if you want to discuss this further, or if you need a copy of this slide, I'll be more than happy to send it over to you.